or die. Comply or die. Comply.
Welcome to GRC Uncensored, a new podcast designed to elevate real conversations with GRC professionals, auditors, regulators, and those building programs around it. Your hosts Troy Fine and Kendra Cooley, alongside producer Elliot Volkman, guide unfiltered discussions that dig into the reality of how governance, risk, and compliance function, rather than the rose-colored perspective that's fueled by millions in marketing spend. Now, onto your hosts.
Hello, and welcome back to GRC Uncensored. I am Elliot, your producer, alongside TJ or Troy, depending on which mood he is in today. I'm not sure. And unfortunately, Kendra is not going to be joining us today, but we have a wonderful guest to talk about a topic or several topics that I think everyone has probably heard a little bit too much about. For that, it's true, TJ. Don't laugh at it. Come on. But for that, we have our wonderful guest, Merritt Baer, who is the Chief Security Officer over at Enkrypt AI, has been a longstanding CISO, Deputy CISO, and other organizations. Anything else you would like to add to that roster, our wonderful guest?
Hi, folks. Good to see you. Merritt, I'm coming in from Miami. Yeah, I'm the Chief Security Officer at Enkrypt AI, a company I've advised actually for over a year now, but just started in full-time. And I also advise Andasite, which does AI-driven SOC transformation. Really interesting work there with a former colleague who used to be the CISO at the CIA. And AppOmni, a company that does SaaS security. So a space that I'm near and dear to, being as I have so much of shared responsibility model hell in my background, foreground, and, horizon. So, yeah. Happy to be here today. We're, I think, going to talk all things GRC Unfiltered was the promise. And
that was the pitch?
Hope we're keeping it.
We'll see. Again, it depends which mood or version of Troy we got. We can either have Troy or we could have TJ, who TJ just
an alter ego who's more fun, or
yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
I see.
Let's start here. TJ or Troy, are we going to start with the question, or are you going to just unload a bomb?
No, we like to start with just one question, just so people get to know you a little bit more. But
what you got, Troy?
Yeah, what's the last thing you asked ChatGPT or a similar tool? And it can be personal, work related, just as long as it's appropriate.
Yeah, my own guardrail. I actually use ChatGPT to revoice things sometimes if I'm planning on drafting it. So the last thing I asked it about was if I wanted to draft, because I already had a draft that was in what I think of as my voice, but my general drafting voice is almost bullet points. I'll put parentheticals, don't do this, don't do that. And for some people, I think they consume that format just fine. But I think for more prose leaning people who are less used to parameterizing, bullet pointing, you know what I mean? I asked it to take my words and make them prose. That's what I did this morning.
Did it do well?
It was fine. To be honest, the end was so saccharine. It was and this is why we have to work on it together. And I was I would never say this. Not only am I not that nice, it was trying to say something that was security and innovation shall hold hands. It's no, they're always kind of in tension. And that's the point.
Oh,
we're supposed to get this, and we're supposed to be able to hurt each other just to the point where the business intervenes.
That is a great answer, because that was one of my questions actually for you. We should just jump into that question. How do security teams that feel like they're hurting innovation with AI, how do they do this in a polite way, or in a way that is not fake, right? It's authentic, and hey, here's how we need to do it. I'm going to say no sometimes, but here's how we can do it the right way. How do you suggest they do that?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because what you're doing is actually on a very superficial level is what I was prompt engineering it. I literally said, okay, now make it less saccharine. And I am okay with there being tension here. Do you know what I mean? So part of me is even in the message delivery, I think the point is that both security teams and devs, or whoever you want to consider the innovation team to be, the revenue shop or the devs themselves who want to go build or whatever, they don't need to be saccharine to each other to be fair to each other. They don't need to come over and be Troy, I just appreciate you. They need to be able to come over and say, hey, we're working on a framework for how we're going to move forward using some of these tools. I think we're going to have a starting point where we allow these, we guardrail, watch these, and we just never allow these. So for example, we're just never going to allow employees to use DeepSeek, but we will allow them to do open source research using these tools, but parameterized in these ways. And I think that can be totally fair. Now you have to go enforce it, which is one of the things that Enkrypt AI is working on that, we do is like mapping controls onto your kind of best intentions type natural language governance docs that you probably ginned up over the last 6 months if you're like other enterprises. But I think that like inherently security teams and other technical or even non-technical teams don't need to be like Winnie the Pooh and Tigger to work well together. They just need to be speaking some of the same language, I mean, literally, and then some of the same expectations and just know how to give folks an understanding of what to expect. And I think that was true. We've seen this transition with infrastructure as code where folks would be building environments that might fail. The minute that if you were a mature security team in, 2019 and now you're ephemeralizing everything. And when I was at AWS, it was like, yeah, your build's going to fail every 15 minutes. And then you're going to get mad and come knock on the door and ask us why it failed. And we wouldn't actually put the fail reason in the return call because we didn't want malicious actors to know why it had failed and then be able to architect around it. But there's all sorts of judgment calls that then go into that. Now you're having a conversation about, oh, well, were you building modularly? Like, why are you using raw EC2 instead of Lambdas, which we can patch from our side? Did you have an internet-facing endpoint? What did you put around that? Did you have fine-grained policies around VPC endpoints and, sort of perimeterizing as a conception, even if it's a VPC instead of a literal perimeter? There's ways in which the best design patterns that you're going to try to implement as a security shop will then take shape in the form of like some rejections to your innovation shop. And those should take some day-to-day forms, but increasingly should be like transparent. And the innovation side doesn't want to deal with the security team anyway. So they start just doing what you have allowed them to go do with more freedom. And I think most innovation shops today, like they want to use AI to vibe code. But they're not actually trying to go outside the bounds. Like they're trying to do it in bounds while they're also getting economies of scale out of it. So I don't think this is, again, I'm veering over to cliche, but not on purpose. Like, I don't think it's impossible to do, and I don't think it's a zero-sum game. But there have to be, like, junctures at which things fail, and then they knock on each other's door. And that knock could be a trouble ticket, or it could be, like, sometimes the knocks are automations.
Do you think you should just block all AI tools until they're approved by security, or?
I think it depends who you are. Like, it depends what your tolerance is and what you're getting out of it. Overall, I think you should have some arms around all of it, including, because there's stakes here around trade secrets, there's stakes around employee offboarding and other things that folks are traditionally sloppy about, and whether you would see access patterns. If you are really good at just overall security behaviors, then you can probably approximate some level of responsible behavior. You still won't get into the content layers of, does my chatbot go off the rails and give customers legal advice when it's not allowed to? Or in one recent case we had with a customer, it was like an accounting firm and their chatbot would tell you how to hide assets from the IRS. It was factually true, and it wasn't giving up, like, they thought they needed us for PHI and, like other secrets that might be at issue. No, they actually just needed to not shoot themselves in the foot. Like, in a lot of ways, AI is like giving people foot guns and then just being like, don't shoot yourself in the foot now. So I think smart security shops at this point are putting guardrails around it. And then they get handsy, the level of handsiness depends on your level of risk tolerance, your level of regulatedness, the level of like data privacy and security that you're interacting with day to day, and frankly, like your maturity around all the other processes that you have to know both data plane and control plane, what you have and how would you know if it's going off the rails. But overall, like, I think that even if it were your policy, if you're Joe CISO at some schmedium business and you say our policy is that no one can use AI, that's not real.
Yeah, no, that prohibition never worked. It only creates shadow AI, and that's way worse. So
I think that it's all who's to say what's worse? But I think it's all, at least to me, measured by the consequences. Like, what are the outputs that you're getting? So on some level, a lot of times, another sort of anecdote here is that a lot of times we get asked, like, can you come red team Microsoft Copilot for us? And it's like, we can. And that might be really helpful for you. But most of the time, what I would be more concerned with is not just what's on Microsoft's side of the Copilot messiness. We have a team of research scientists, so we're doing responsible disclosure all the time when we see, LLMs spitting back outputs that they shouldn't. But I think most people, again, this sort of feels cloud security-ish, but most people should just be worried about what's happening on their side with the content. Like, what responses is it generating? I don't care whether it's the Copilot vulnerability allowing it to hallucinate or whether it is, your engineer prompt injecting it so that it gives them everyone's payroll data in the company. On some level, what I care about are just bad days. If I'm a security leader, I don't care if the fault is with the model or with the data that we're putting in or with, like, what I care about is the CIA triad. Like, I want it to work. I want it to protect the data that I need protected. And frankly, if you need it a lot protected, it probably shouldn't be going in. And I want it to, I want confidentiality, integrity, and availability within the bounds of what my use case is. And those vary a lot. We're talking about everything from like an agent that a security team might run to remediate a bad day to common LLM hallucinations or prompt injections or other types of bad days. And I think on some level, what I care about is just the output itself and how usable or not usable it is.
Yeah.
And how does that go into a cycle of them?
Yeah. It's interesting you brought up the accounting one, giving it how to avoid taxes from the IRS or how to hide money. And like, it's all these big accounting firms now, just because I know this industry are rolling out all these chatbots and tax advisory AI. And are they asking it or are they like trying and testing it out themselves to see if it'll tell people how to avoid money? Because that's a huge liability, right? To a huge accounting firm. If that happened and that got out, like, that really hurt them reputational wise, legally. That would not be good. I'm curious how companies should be doing this and figuring these things out. And because you can do this for 200 hours, test it out, and then one person's going to ask a question that you never thought of, and the guardrails might not have been there, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's literally what we do as a company is guardrail it and then alarm. Even when you're hitting the guardrails, you could be able to know what people are doing. But I think the real question is, like, do people even know the use cases that their business has that involve AI? And I think that answer is, like, currently no. Most enterprise CIOs and CISOs, and by that I would include a lot of government and companies, but also like schools and other folks, like, essentially they are not in charge of what Marsha from HR does in the same way that they are in charge of what Marsha on the development team does, in the same way that they're in charge of what Marsha on the product team does, where product might be building like an interactive chatbot that makes promises to customers. The devs are writing some, infrastructure or other underpinning stuff. And then you've got your, just kind of like company functions, whether it's HR, payroll, internal stuff, they're all using AI tools. And I don't think that the security team, like, folks are generally standing up something like an AI governance committee or even like an AI center of excellence or something. And they'll have like a person from legal in it. They'll have, maybe there's a new lead AI, whatever. They'll, but it's a little bit of
AI cedar. AI governance
yeah,
cedar.
like patchwork across the industry, which I think is typical. Exactly. Because like AI is going to both predict whether you can get a mortgage or not, and also predict whether you're going to like commit credit card fraud or not, and also predict whether they want to give you that credit card in the first place. Like it is across so many core business functions. And obviously with those are regulated too. So because we've seen predictive analytics be so toxic, in some of these, we have like consumer facing regulations that sit on top, or data privacy regulations that sit on top. So now you have to integrate those too. This is where I think just like, my short recommendation, and I'm not here to like sell a product, is like you should figure out what you have, put arms around it, and then tune it over time so that you can see when folks are running into your guardrails. Like, it feels very much to me like good old-fashioned security work, where you say, actually, you know what? We've been like pushing these requests out, but I think that it's a valid use case and folks are getting enough from it that we should watch it instead of blocking. Like there's a lot of security use cases that are a process of pruning and tuning over time, including valid credential use, for example, which is the classic source of ransomware and all the pretty much other bad days in the world. You know what I mean? Like, we still work on that. There is no such thing as least privilege. There is no such thing as zero trust. We just kind of chase this as a North Star that is worth going for. And I think that's true for AI too. Like, we work on this, having the right tooling in place can really allow you to get that visibility and also to tune and refine those kind of like tolerances, for lack of, like the business case, and have that conversation where you're like, why are you, if folks, when I was at AWS as a deputy CISO, if folks were hitting my guardrails too much, I would go talk to that team, that dev team, because at AWS, each product team is like their own, they have, the GM is like their CEO, and it'd be like, what are you guys trying to do? Because we shouldn't be kicking out, like either our guardrails are too aggressive or you're doing something that's off the rails. So like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Yeah.
We need to figure out why.
Exactly. I know. And then you can go implement those in a more like mature way over time. So you might say, all right, let's start lightening up some of these based on like load and other end cost. And if it hits a regulatory, we have to say no to all of that. But we could start tuning down some of the other things that are just like, I don't want to, for example, like tuning toward kicking out. One of the things we had to do was like figure out whether you're going to throttle or kick out everything that looks like a DDoS. Like, that could also be a really good day. A DDoS looks a lot until you get into the context of where the IP addresses are coming from and all the other things. Like, if you're looking solely at traffic,
you're going to block
it can look like, yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So then, and then context plays in. And I think that's true here as in everywhere. You know what I mean? So you better understand the use case.
So you need to involve the end users in the guardrails and make sure that they understand what the guardrails are and make sure they make sense and have them be a part of creating those guardrails.
Yeah. And I actually think the beauty these days is that you can sandbox stuff, although it'll always play out differently in the real world, but you can go to them with like, kind of like your guardrails written the way that infrastructure as code would. And you can, like you can play out what it would look like to see this request come in and what comes out of it without having to put a lot on the line here. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of ways in which, between the ephemeralization of environments and the ability to sandbox and then play out red teaming. And like, when we red team stuff, we don't actually take it down. We just show you what your model would have given us. Like, we don't actually go hand it over to your customer or your regulator, or, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of ways in which we have the freedom now to kind of like canary type these type of things.
You hear that, Elliot? There's no such thing as zero trust. Remember that.
Yeah.
I actually put a little marker, so we're going to
use zero trust water bottle. Nothing comes in or out either. So anyway, would you say, Elliot?
Oh, no, I was just joking. I actually put a little marker on there. We're going to make that our promo clip for the episode.
He has another podcast called Zero Trust, so it's perfect that you said that.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I think you agree with that there is no such thing as zero trust, right?
Do you really want to open that
No,
can?
I'm just saying, I think, though, I think you would agree with that. We don't have to get into that, but...
It's actually funny, and I will try not to pull us off on a tangent. I think there's a concept and a philosophy that is zero trust, but implementation is where it fails. And I don't want to say co-founder of the creation of zero trust, but Chase Cunningham literally just tore into another vendor today, and it's floating around right there in that same situation. So like, philosophically, I think it's a system that you can aspire to, but you are correct. It's designed to fail, because who can actually invest in like meeting all the requirements that it actually lists out?
It's not just that. I think like the idea of zero trust would be a static point in time. So that's why I say this water bottle is zero trust, nothing comes in or out. in practice, not only are we seeing dynamic networks and ephemeral credentials and all these other things, but like now you've got non-human identities, you've got machine to machine as a notional reality. Could it be real the way that like cold fusion or continuous compliance is real? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think there is this idea that you're chasing that is the tuning and pruning that is so precise that in a mathematically perfect world, it could exist. You know what I mean? But like, even that has some judgment calls around what perfection looks like. Other than nothing in or everything in, there is a lot of judgment that business basically will always have an opinion about. And by the way, like, anyone who's been a security practitioner knows that a lot of this is like dress and suspenders and looks like hard work. And you just get better at it over time. And that's what you can have these conceptual frameworks. And I think they're still worth pursuing. Just because you're not going to be perfect doesn't mean it's of no value. But I think the point is that, like, in practice, mature security teams sit there all the time and they're like, all right, we're anticipating Black Friday and we're going to see a spike in traffic. Do we want to tune our permissions to allow for some of that? At the same time, how would we know based on the threat indicators that we're seeing for scattered spider right now that we're not just allowing and paying for more there? Where are we going to toggle these goods that we're balancing? By the way, are we seeing a pattern of fraud in our industry that we've seen before that we want to be particularly responsive to? Are we regulated? Do we have new data privacy regulations coming out that if it went off the rails, we would suffer a penalty that's greater than us tuning up? You know, like a lot of this is like good old fashioned hard work, and you get better over time by, you know, getting data and then watching them and doing the work of security teams. Now you're going to do it with AI for AI. But like, the fact is that AI is going to be everywhere in your business. And if you're a logistics company or a, you know, pharma company or a whatever, then you're probably already seeing it. If you are someone who's, you know, a more traditional business like an accounting company, you're going to see it play out, you know, in the kind of chatbot ways. I mean, initially, I think, but like everyone's got a mix of ways in which it's going to be both in your supply chain and in your enterprise, both internal and external facing. And that's a good thing. You know, like we should be, I think the nature of data is changing. I think we're going to see abstractions that AI has kind of created as parsing layers. Like 2 years from now, inshallah, no one will be paying for Microsoft Purview. No offense, Elliot. But like, that like the granular DLP type solutions will just not fit the use cases that we're seeing around the kinds of usable data that we are getting from and to AI. But you know what I mean? So I think we are at a sea change, but I think right now we're just in the thick of it. Folks are doing it all over the place.
Yeah, that could be a good and bad thing, I guess, depending on. They're just.
But in wanted for Marvel superheroes, not for the real world.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, it's a reference point. I do think that like having a lens on what you want as a company, like a philosophical approach, but also a values-based approach is great. And you will still have texture in the way you go execute on those.
Yeah, I also think like for certain companies, AI, inherently there's a higher risk of using AI just based on the type of data you have and the type of customers you have and the regulations you have to follow.
Well, yeah, you'd be surprised though, because I've seen immature approaches to AI in a company, even a less regulated company, where the AI agreed to respond with extremely out of bounds responses, not only kind of offensive, but illegal, like things that involve child sexual abuse or other mediums that are just like inherently illegal. So I don't think that like saying, well, we're just a company that isn't that regulated or something. I don't think ostriching is going to be a rewarding strategy here. I do think that most enterprise CIOs and CISOs are kind of waiting to see an enforcement action to understand what they're going to call enough attention to this area. And I think we'll start to see those, just like we did with data privacy. You know, we saw Equifax and we saw Wyndham and we saw the TJX breach and others like trigger a series of conversations around what good enough looks like from a data kind of attention standpoint, data privacy, data security, where they were like, I don't know what good looks like, but it's not this. And I think you should look in this framework. It was kind of what judges said. Like, I didn't see a single case where a judge said, you know, you took all the right steps and you got hit anyway.
Right.
What they're going to look for are folks who didn't have a plan, who made up a plan but weren't actually doing it, for whose plan didn't line up with the like industry standards and other things that they should have known that they had, and who lied about it to their regulators. That's basically, and that was where, SolarWinds and others came under the gun, was like, you lied about it, or you misrepresented it in a way that they considered to be fraudulent. So I think we're going to see, if I were to crystal ball this, I think we're going to see that play out too.
Well, like, where do you see like regulation impacting like companies like OpenAI? Because recently they had that situation where unfortunately someone took their life and they were using, I don't know if you saw that, but they were using OpenAI and it was encouraging and almost and like giving them ways. And it's like, isn't that like enough right there where it's, hold on, we have to stop this. What is happening? There is no regulation really to stop that right now. And I don't even know what will happen to OpenAI in this, in that type of, there's other situations, I'm sure, 1,000 other ones that exist that we don't know about, but what is happening?
I
like,
don't anticipate the regulations hitting OpenAI. I anticipate the regulations hitting manufacturing and pharma and healthcare, because they already have regulations in place about how they can behave and what kind of attentiveness they need to the processes by which they innovate.
Yeah.
I anticipate the regulations, and by the way, other countries are also going to impact this. One of the things that we end up doing is working with folks who have GDPR, EU AI Act, whatever Malaysia's going to do next week, whatever Dublin is going to come up with, around, because folks have such distinct expectations around transparency of models, around data residency and data requirements. I think we will continue to see a patchwork, including in the US. I think we may see state level AI regulations. I don't anticipate federal level AI regulations on the AI producers for a couple of reasons. One is just that, there's a lot of use cases here. Trying to capture all bad days in one feels hard and maybe impotent. The other is that like CSAM is already illegal, so they don't need to go in and create that if they are surfacing model results that give illegal outputs. The DOJ can go after them today. So you don't need that's not regulatory territory. That's criminal enforcement. The same way that 20 years ago, people were like, we're going to need a cybercrime act. And it was like, is it just crime? You know what I mean? There are a lot of ways in which you may or may not need specific statute tuned to this. But on the regulatory front, I think in a Trump White House, I don't see a lot of federal regulations coming down. I just don't. But I think enforcement actions are what we have been seeing, whether it's the SEC, the FTC. So SEC was folks like SolarWinds, including, charging Tim Wren, the VP of security individually, FTC, which was the Ashley Madison and some of the other suits on data privacy, the DOJ with Uber, with Joe Sullivan. We end up feeling these burns usually the CISO community, by seeing individual enforcement actions. And I think that will be true here, but I think it will be based on, like I said, I don't think we're going to see regulations coming down at the federal level on ChatGPT and its competitors. I think what we will see are enforcement actions on hardworking, presumably well-intentioned CIOs and CISOs at bread and butter enterprises, whether they are whether are a traditional business or whether they are a school or a government entity. And then I also think whether or not they're in agriculture or pharma or food or whatever, and it'll be contextualized based on their data regulations and other things that are at issue here. And I think that's why folks should get ready, because you're just as susceptible to enforcement actions that involve AI as you have always been, all along. And you have the same obligations around, whether it's patient health or whether it's supply chain, or whether it's national security obligations. There's a lot of ways in which folks have existing, obligations and regulatory requirements.
Do you think CISOs, though, are going to be the ones that are the fingers getting pointed at for AI? I guess bad days with AI, or should there be another role, or should it be the CEO? I guess that's where I struggle with this. Who's really responsible for responsible AI at a company?
So candidly, we even are figuring this out, and Enkrypt AI literally does AI security. So I would say some of the time we are talking to the devs who want to understand how they can build without getting themselves in trouble. Some of the times we are talking to the security shop, and some of the times we're talking to their newly formed like AI governance committee or like AI center of excellence. It depends on the industry and sort of like the level of maturity, but also some choices that they've made. I think the current model right now is that within the last year, someone at the board/CEO level said, we need to stand up some approach here. So then they have some kind of committee, center of excellence situation, and then they put together a natural language framework governance set of principles that ranges from like 2 to 200 pages, depending on how many lawyers were involved. I'm completely serious.
I believe it.
And then they, like, by the time that I am talking to them, they say, I think we have a doc. I think it's about 30 pages. I don't know how I would know whether we're actually doing what we said we are going to do or not. I don't even know if this team over here that's building, you know, the research side is aware that we have this policy. And it's like, okay, well, let's go turn this into actionable reality and also find out who's hitting, to our earlier conversation, like who's hitting those guardrails in a way that feels like they're either fundamentally betraying some of the principles of the company in terms of their building commitments, or our principles are off, like our guardrails are off on this. And let's go chase down the kind of parts of the company or the enterprise that are not in line. And we work on this all the time. I mean, it could be, and lots of companies are still a mix of OT and IT. They are still a mix of on-prem and cloud. They're still a mix of customer-facing, internal, and maybe some kind of third-party systems. They're still, you know, there's a lot of equities at play when they're thinking about this, and we will start with a use case and kind of get you used to it, because this is basically a muscle group. Doing safety and security around AI it's like doing cloud security or BYOD policies were in the day. It's not impossible to do, but you have to go do it. It's not going to happen by accident.
Most leadership at companies want to do this the right way with it? Or do you think there's so much money going into AI companies and everything? Do you think leadership actually cares about this stuff? Or do they just want to check a box and say, we have this policy and well, here's our policy. It's made to the public. Here's our responsible AI policy. It says all the right things. Or do they actually want to do it and implement it and operationalize it and build guardrails and do this the right way?
Far be it for me to pretend to be everyone's therapist and what they really want or what they say they want. But I think folks who have announced that they have a plan but have made no steps to implement it will be the first ostriches that enforcement actions come for. And by the way, I don't think it's just regulators. I think it's going to be your own equities in your company itself, you know, is getting lots of pressure to use AI because you're going to be left behind. Now, if you don't understand and make genuine efforts to put arms around it, more than just like saying we have a policy and it sits over here on Dan's desk, I think that there will be very judgment day type examples of folks who say that and no one buys it, whether it's shareholders, whether it's regulators, whether it's your own customer end users. I mean, we've seen this with companies time after time where they underestimate the fact that security is a property of everything you deliver. And if you have not indexed on security, I don't care if you are a hospitality or retail or, you know, but certainly manufacturing and other folks who come up time and again for having their practices not up to standard, that they will feel the burn, that it will be their own, the value of their stock, the end users who choose to do business with them or not. Like, there's a lot of ways in which you can hurt yourself by, if you do only lip service, you, I think, will be at least subject to the fact that you might be one of the negative examples. And, you know, maybe you play the odds and you hope that you're not the one. People do that. But I mean, the alternative is that you actually go take some affirmative steps. You do the hard work. It was like, I don't know about you, but like, I sleep much better just being like, look, we might not be perfect, but we have a plan. we think it's reasonable, we think it's defensible, attestable, and like getting better over time.
Yeah.
I would much rather get hauled in front of Congress and be able to give that response than to be like, yes, I knew there was a policy, I pretended while I let it sit on Dan's desk.
Yeah. I also think there's a lot too where people want to do the right thing, but company innovation, people want to push things through, and then the people wanting to put the guardrails up, or whether that's security or legal or whoever, kind of gets pushed back, or they take them into consideration, but they
There's good over here and there's good over there. But I think part of the role of a security shop is to understand what's at stake and make some judgment calls, like high value judgment. And by the way, I don't think it's like the premise of this podcast, but I think when we get into conversations about what jobs AI will take and what they won't, like one of the things AI has a hard time doing, it can parameterize and it can contextualize within the data you've given it and with the kind of preferences you've given it. But I think what we will hire for in security shops is high judgment individuals. And that has always been true, but it will become even more true now that we have some of the like pedantic stuff out the door.
Yeah.
And I think that will it still takes work. It's just a different type of work. And like understanding making some calls, even like market forces, geopolitics, there's a lot happening.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And we talk about that all the time on this podcast, how AI is coming for my job. So I
hope so. No, you know what I mean? I think that anyone who's saying AI won't take jobs is lying to you.
I agree.
Of course, well, every industrial revolution has taken jobs. But you don't see a lot of people being like, I really want to make clothes by hand. A lot of times it ends up not just taking the kind of like computer-based jobs, but also giving more precision. Like there are certain inherent security roles that are creative and that are around like what motivates humans and why would someone go break this, or more interestingly, like why would someone go build this? What should we be building that's interesting here and allows for security to flow through? Like, how do we think about this in a more imaginative way? I don't think that AI is particular. It's very good at parsing. At least right now, it's not good at 0 to 1. It's good at iterative work. And I think that like, when I was talking to like the nature of data changing, I think computer to computer interactions will start to be the norm. And I'm okay with that. Like, I hate having to call and make a reservation for lunch. I don't actually enjoy that part. And I also but being at lunch and exchanging ideas, no computer can be a stand-in. If my friend wanted to send his co-pilot to sit at lunch with me, I don't work by mistake. I don't want to be there. It's not interesting. And by the way, I don't get to understand like his motivations or how his like eyes squint a little when he's more upset about this thing than he is about that. Like I don't get all the context that actually matters in the world, which is like what makes people find meaning, what makes people care about something. How do we, like you can be a pharma company using AI to build R&D and you still won't have the answer to what, their dad said before he died. The most important things will never be AI generated.
Unless my kids want the co-pilot to be. See, that's the real question.
It's in the form of the whatever Bluey episode.
Yeah, well, my 9-year-old and 5-year-old won't be okay with that. That'll be the question in 10 years. But
you wouldn't be okay with that, right?
Yeah.
You, on your deathbed, were like, maybe I shouldn't have given them my AI co-pilot version of me when they were 5 years old. You know what I mean? It's like, that is the part that is, I think we gloss over sometimes, that like efficiencies or something. It's like, I think efficiencies where efficiencies are due and everything else is still there. Like the meat of it has never been about efficiencies. It's been about all the least efficient things in life. Like the part where, you wake up early and you smell the rainy air. Like no AI can do that for you.
Yeah. Is there anything else? Any last final thoughts? Anything you want to conclude on? What do you want to tell CISOs out there? It's one piece of advice.
I honestly think the most important thing that I would get out as a message is like the Ostrich method is not working because it's going to come. We're already there. You know what I mean? Like the passcode to collect $200 is not happening. You're already living in this world. It is time to put arms around it. You don't need to be an expert. There's a lot of ways in which like CISOs are basically really good business people who understand security at this point. So the same way that you don't have to be like an expert on kernel exploits, you don't have to be an expert on AI guardrailing and security, but you do need to have a plan, do something about it, exhibit better behavior over time. And, you know, we can do that in your customer facing, your internal. We can also do it, you know, around just like noticing access patterns. You mentioned shadow AI, you know, even aside from content layers, just seeing who's using what. This is what App Omni does, right? Or understanding how your security team is going to take AI capabilities and like, in addition to getting hopefully less Splunk spend, you know, like taking what have been really painful, like data island type realities and actually creating wins on behalf of your team and on behalf of your company. Like you don't need to be an AI expert to get wins on behalf of your entity. And I think the point is like, feel free to reach out. Like there is no kind of bar to get in. Like everyone is in now. And we're all working on this stuff, but there are also some things that work better than others. Yeah. And we're already, you know, getting to a stage where I think those governance frameworks and kind of like best intentions are turning into actions. And we're working with folks on those, and I'm happy to work with folks too.
Yeah, I love that. Where can people find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
I'm on LinkedIn, although I'm a little cagey there because I try to keep it to my real friends, but feel free to send me a note if you add me there. And then I'm also on Twitter. I have a website at merritt.baer.com. You can send me a note there on an intake form. But yeah, feel free. I'm also at Merritt@enkryptai.com. We can pop that up. Feel free to send me an email. And I'm like all over the world. So I usually try to publicize if I'm giving. I don't even want to time bound this because whenever you're watching this will be someday, eventually in the future. But, you know, come find me. I try to put my tour dates up on my website. So come find me in real life sometime soon.
Yeah, love it. Thank you for being on. This was a really authentic conversation. That's exactly what we go for here. So appreciate your insight. You're definitely knowledgeable when it comes to AI and security. I think everybody can learn from you. So really appreciate you being on the episode this week.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to GRC Uncensored, the podcast, where Troy and Kendra know their shit, and our producer just talks shit. To learn more about GRC, go to grcuncensored.com, subscribe to our newsletter, or join our community on Reddit. Viewpoints expressed during the show do not reflect the brands, employers, or companies of our hosts, guests, or sponsors.